Thanks everybody for joining us today. It is Fruit Tree Day at the nursery. We're packed and loaded with fresh fruit trees here for 2021, so it's a perfect time of year here to do it. We'd like to thank everybody for joining us. Say hi to Nicole. She's in the background running the show. She'll be answering your questions as we go through.
Good morning.
So we got a little rain coming down. It's January here in Washington, a perfect day here to do some planting. I can hear it on the greenhouse. But I want to start by saying, we are located in Washington. It's awesome that we have a lot of folks joining us from different parts of the country. Everybody is sheltering and staying safe and probably hanging out, working in their yards like us up here. But I'm a Pacific Northwest guy, Western Washington. So if you have questions on citrus, avocados, pecan trees, all the stuff that does not grow here, I would recommend that you talk to your local nursery. Those are things we can't grow in Western Washington. We'll cover a large number of fruit trees today that are suitable for Western Washington, as well as Eastern Washington a little bit as well too. So hopefully everybody's got the sheet, little outline you can take notes on and follow. It's available on our website as part of the class. We will record this video just as a reminder, so if you want to go back and look at my bald head again here later today or check on something, you certainly can watch it again. It'll be up on YouTube here in a few hours after the class is done. So we'll start with kind of some basic things. Again, being here in Washington, we'll start with Eastern versus Western Washington. I mean, we're a unique state. There's a lot of other states similar that have two totally distinct climates between west of the Cascade Mountains and east of the mountains. A totally different climate over the hill here. Because really when it comes down to fruit, it comes down to two main things. What do you have as far as heating units? How warm do you get in the summer? And how many chilling hours do you get? How many days are you below freezing at night? Western Washington, we're very mild in the maritime climate, so we tend to struggle with a lot of heating units and we don't get quite as cold. Eastern Washington has both of those things. So if you're local around here, that's why we tend to drive over the Cascades to go get our apricots and peaches and nectarines and things that we struggle to grow on this side. There are specific varieties that will do better in Western Washington we'll talk about today, but it's fruit central there east of the Cascade Mountains. They have maximum heat and maximum cold. So that's the first thing to kind of think about when you're considering what to do. Location in the garden should always be at least 6 hours of sunlight. The more sun, the quicker you're going to ripen, the less disease, the better health. Everything deals with sun. So we are not planting fruit trees in shade. We want to have a good open location, good spacing between trees. A lot of folks perhaps considering planting multiple trees, setting up a small little home orchard is a great way to go. We want to leave room for these to grow. As they develop, we want to try to keep them pruned down and let them spread. So I'm going to try to talk you into somewhere in that 15, 20, even 25 feet between trees if you can. That will allow them to develop. You can keep them low and spreading in shape, pick the fruit easier. And again, air and sun is moving all through that orchard. We're going to have a lot less issues to deal with down the road. So always take a look at that sun. Soils and drainage, is a huge thing this side of the mountains. As it's raining again today, we get a wet winter and a dry summer. There's certain trees that just will not like the heavy clay, poor drained soil here in Western Washington. So be very careful where you locate your trees. Make sure we've got adequate drainage. The apples and the pears will always tend to do a little bit better in wetter locations. You see those a little more commonly. If I'm trying to grow peach, nectarine, apricot, cherry, plum, the majority of everything else, we want to make sure we keep those a little higher and drier, not quite as wet in the winter. Again, they will struggle a bit. We'll talk a little bit about dormant spraying here towards the end, but this is the time of year when we can kind of start clean for 2021. So if we had any issues with our fruit trees the previous season, this is the time of year to address them and say, okay, I don't want to deal with scab again or whatever the problem was. We can get that spray started now so that we start this next season clean and we've got a little better luck for the next season. Fertilizing is always a must. We have as part of our EV Stone Organics program, fruit berry vine food is an excellent fertilizer for really all your edible stuff except blueberries. We would want to get some rhododendron or acid fertilizer. This is a great food for the fruit trees. So we plant these trees, we're going to add, we're going to dig a very nice sized hole. Most of our stuff is still bare root. I'll show you here in a minute, but whether it's canned or bare root it doesn't matter. We want to dig a nice hole, maybe 2 foot, 30 inches across, a couple feet deep, mix in maybe a third compost or a nice amendment into our native soil to make sure we add some nutrition. And I'm always going to put that fruit berry vine food down, say a cup, spread around that hole as we plant our new tree. If I really want to get my fruit trees kicking, I'm going to make them happy by adding a second dose, typically in that mid-May to early June time frame. That will get me a nice flush of growth over the summer and allow me to have the reward of that for the next season. So try to do it at least twice a year if you can. I think that's plenty up here. If you've got happy soil, you're going to have happy trees. So watch the fertilizer as well. We're going to go through specific fruits here in a second, but as we look at different things, it's all of our trees are grafted. So we have a specific rootstock. Then we go and we've got our plant that we purchase on top. And the rootstock is everything as far as size, whether it's dwarf, whether it's mini dwarf, semi-dwarf. Here at Sunnyside, probably 99% of what we have is dwarf or mini dwarf. There's a few things that we can't get in dwarf. We will get some semi, but everything out there is clearly tagged. And that will make all the difference in your world. As you look at our fruit selection, you can find our list online. You will see heights listed in there for an approximate height of those different styles of trees. And everybody seems to want to keep their fruit trees down a little bit and maybe spreading. Again, easier to pick the right rootstock. You'll have a little less tree to deal with long term. Keep in mind, as we go through these specific types of trees, it's all about pollination. We'll talk mason bees here later. It's all, you have to have the bees in your yard, and we have to, on a lot of trees, cross-pollinate. I want to make sure that's clear because I think a lot of folks come in and purchase a tree without asking the staff, and they never get fruit because they needed a tree to cross-pollinate with that. So there's certainly some things that are self-fertile that we'll talk about. I can plant one tree, I'm good. I don't have to worry about anything else. But the majority of all the apples and the pears and the Asian pears, some plums, some cherries, we have to have 2 different varieties. I want to make sure that's clear. I'm going to go buy a Honey Crisp and a Cosmic Crisp. I want to go buy a Honey Crisp and a Spartan, a Liberty and a Spartan. I have to mix 2 different pollen sources together so that little mason bee can visit both of my trees and cross-pollinate it when it's in flower here. That way I get fruit production on both the plants, okay? So make sure we keep that in mind. For us, I'm always looking, for the best of the best for our climate. We're specializing in fruit trees here for Western Washington. So I'm trying to find things that don't need heat, don't need as much cold or chilling hours in the winter, and things that are very disease resistant. We get a lot of rain in the springtime, and certain trees are going to struggle a little bit more. And as we go through the types, I'll certainly give you a few recommendations on that as well. So just kind of we'll get going here. On the first thing we'll kind of talk about, we'll lump kind of apples and pears and Asian pears together, because those are what we would call the spur fruits. So if I have to develop a spur, I'm going to grab a branch here to show you. And this is how I do my production. So here's a small branch we borrowed off a apple tree. And if I look at that wood, again, all plants, I can follow the growth pattern down through the years. So with spur type fruits like apples and pears and Asian pears, we have to wait 2 seasons to get production. If I go in every year and I cut all the wood off my apple tree, I don't have any 1-year-old wood to develop the spur the second year that I can pick on the third. I'm hoping that makes sense, because this one's a little, you can find probably pictures of this online. But if I look at that wood, this is the only area that I'm going to get a cluster of flowers and a group of fruit to drop. So as I'm pruning a plant like an apple or a pear, I want to look for those 2-year-old wood or that spurs, because those are the points that I can prune to. Or you're probably going to ask me in the question and answer, well, I haven't touched my apple in 5 years and I have shoots going to the sky all over the place. Now what do I do? Well, if I go in and I saw all that 1-year-old wood off, just like we talked about, I'm going to have nothing this season. I want to leave, short bud chunks. Maybe I cut those down and leave 3 or 4 or 5 buds of wood sticking up in good directions on the top of my tree, so that that will continue to grow, and I will start to get that spur development in that 1-year-old wood. Then I can pick fruit the next season again. So if you look at something like the apple there, you know, here's a pear. You can see that we pruned the top. This could have had another 3-foot shoot coming out of it, but I've pruned it again to a side bud. Now this will go the direction I want it to and continue to shape. I would rather have that tree spreading in a nice open crown versus having all that go straight for the sun. So by thinning it out a little bit and then heading it back this time of year, I think you could control, but really watch for those spurs. That's all that matters with the apples, the pears, and the Asian pears. We have to have those spurs to drop the fruit, drop the flower, and then get the fruit on it as well. So if you look at, you know, take apples, for instance, you know, we have a whole bunch of varieties of apples out there. Again, good ones for Western Washington. Majority are very disease resistant. We have Cosmic Crisp, which is a Washington only apple. We have Honey Crisp, is probably our most popular one. And lots of other ones of good ones as well. So look at the variety, and then do I want dwarf? Do I want semi-dwarf? And an apple, we also can add in mini dwarf. So typically mini dwarf apples, I could probably keep under 10 foot easily with some good pruning. We had some property in Cle Elum for years and had pretty much all mini dwarf apples. They're very pickable with the short ladder, not having to climb up and risk your life to get apples that are 20 feet in the air. So if we can get mini dwarf, we can keep them down, still get great size fruit, nothing changes. It's just the size of the plant is much more manageable. If we go to dwarf fruit stock, you know, then we're in that 10 to 12 foot range, something again, very manageable for a home garden or in a home orchard. Semi-dwarf, maybe 15 or 18 feet as it grows, which may be some people's preference. And certainly pruning will dictate again the size. I can still probably keep a little semi-dwarf down as well. But again, apples have to be pollinated. So we have to go back when we're purchasing an apple, and we would get 2 different varieties of apple to cross-pollinate, and then I have fruit on both trees, okay? If we look at European pears, you know, our long neck pears, you know, same thing. We have to have 2 different varieties to cross-pollinate. We carry a number of good European pears back there, great for home orchards to make choices from. So we would have that, you know, the 2 varieties, whether maybe you want more fresh eating, you want a good keeper, you want one for canning, there would be a good selection of choices for all the above. So take a look at your options. Again, our website's got the great list with pictures on there that Nicole did. Will tell you all you need to know as you're making your selections. Asian pear is the last one, and honestly, probably, you know, if you came to me and said, what's a good, easy fruit to try growing here in Western Washington, I would probably send you towards Asian pear. That's an easy, instant gratification type fruit. If you haven't tried Asian pear, they look like apple, but taste like pear. So they're easy to grow. They're round in shape. Again, pollinator I need, but you would get fruit on those trees usually the first year here. We got some pretty good sized ones, and you would get fruit instantaneously, not have to wait a year or 2 like you may have to on some of the apples and the European style pears. The last thing to kind of throw, you know, under the mix there with those is, you know, man's a clever creature, and we tend to kind of play with genetics. So what we have done is crossed Asian pear with European pear. So if you like maybe the crisper texture of a European pear, but you want the large round fruit of an Asian, there's some great hybrids now between the 2. And all of those pears can go together. I can put the hybrid with the European and a European with an Asian, and I can mix those together however I like, and I'll still get the cross-pollination. But if you look for ones that we have, like Maxi or Ready Robin would be the 2 best ones that we carry. Very nice fruit on those that kind of grow a little bit more like an Asian pear, but probably give you a fruit a little bit closer to what a European pear texture and taste and crispness and all that. So that's the last one on there. Now, give me 1 second here, because I'm going to grab, I'll wait till the cherry and do it. I'll grab an espalier. You know, here. Now that's bare root. I just pulled that right out of the pot, and I got happy root system. You know, and as long as I got this out, let's just look at basic fruit tree. Oh, I'm going to go through the roof here. So I've got root system. You can see that graft right there where the root system is grafted on. Now I've got my stock, okay? I never, ever, ever want to plant this graft down in the ground. You know, I've had some people over the years think, well, if I bury it deeper and plant it to there, it just won't get as big. We have to have that graft out of the soil. It cannot be buried or we will rot the trunk. So there's my soil line anywhere down in there when I plant any of these trees. This particular one I brought in because you can see that, well, what kind of funky fruit tree is that? That's an espalier. So if I look at this plant right here, this happens to be an Asian or Oriental pear. If I look at this tree, I've got my pollination covered. I've got 1 variety, 2 varieties, 3 varieties. So I have each of these tiers has its own distinct flavor. So I only have to plant the 1 tree and I don't have to get 2. So espaliers away on those spur fruits, I can keep them much lower. You know, I'm 6'3", so I could plant this in the ground, and I've only got myself less than a 6-foot tall plant that I can train laterally along a fence, you know, build some stakes. You can train this outside to side with some support. I'll get full fruit production on an espalier, but I'll only have to plant the 1 and not plant a tree, but take up a nice sunny fence line or a border plant that I can use to train. We've got a couple really nice ones here at the nursery. If you want to come take a look at older ones for pruning and things, is a little bit easier than explain. But if you come down, we can give you a little, I'll give you a little lesson down here, but that's just a kind of an example as a cheater. I only have to buy the 1 and not 2, okay? We'll have the same thing out there in a tree. I would buy a combination apple, would have 5 kinds of apple on the same tree. Each branch is grafted in with a different variety. So I plant 1 tree, I've got a nice variety of fruit. And if I'm on limited space or a smaller city yard, that allows me to have a really nice selection of apples or pears or cherries and not have to plant 2 trees. So if you want to take a look at the combos, that may be a good way to go for a lot of folks. Those are available in that first group that we talked about, all the spur fruits, okay? So if we look at the second one on here, is cherries. Now, if I pull a piece of cherry out, this is a little bit different than we talked about with the spur fruits. If you remember, I have to wait 2 years on wood to get fruit production on a spur. With cherries, it's 1. So if I look at that little branch I brought in, again, I can follow what grew last year, okay? And what has happened, I've already set my flower buds. This is where I'll get a huge cluster of flower. The bees pollinate it for me, and boom, I've got my fruit going on there. So the cherries, I only have to wait 1 season to get the fruit. So if you think about that and pruning, you know, what am I not going to do in the winter? I'm not going to run out there and shave my whole tree off, or I've probably cut off the majority of my 1-year-old wood. That season, I'm not going to get very much flower, not going to get much cherry production. So we want to be careful to thin, okay, for structure, for sun, for air, all the things we always talk about in classes, but I'm not going to cut it back hard. I want to make sure I leave those areas that I have the production for that season, okay? So cherries are kind of one that's a little bit confusing as far as varieties that you'll find all over the place. But for us, you know, I try to stick with self-fertile cherries, again, meaning I can plant 1 tree, the bees stay on that 1 tree and pollinate it for me, and I've got production. I don't have to have 2 separate varieties of cherry. The only cherry that we have back there is Rainier that I would have to have a pollinator. Any cherry works with another one, okay? So if I have Rainier and that's one that I like, I got to make sure I get a second variety to mix in there. The other option with cherry is pie cherry. So maybe you like a little sweet, a little sour, like cherry pie like I do. Then plant a pie cherry. Those are really heavy bloomers, you know. And if you have room, that's a great way to attract mason bees and pollinators into your yard early. Is have a pie cherry as one of your options. It can pollinate a sweet cherry again, but it offers maximum flower and something that again would help you a little bit with the pollination. Okay. The other option with cherry, if I can pick it up here, is something like this. Okay. I'm hiding behind this shrub because that's essentially what it is, a shrub, okay? So we will have more of these come in, but there's a whole series of hardy cherries that have come out of the north that grow like shrubs. That will have a delicious, really high sugar content cherry, but only grow in a multi-stem shrub, maybe 8 feet tall is all. Have some people over the last couple of years who's been out, use them in a whiskey barrel planter, put them on the deck, you know, use them in a small spot in the yard and not have to worry about, again, a huge tree. So for us, it would be Romeo and Juliet are the two main ones that we carry, and also one called Carmine Jewel. That's a little bit more of the sweet and sour, but Romeo and Juliet have been extremely popular up here. Super, super hardy. They bloom a little later than other cherries. They're so fertile. So maybe pass frost a little bit more if you live in colder climates. I mean, these three creatures came out of Saskatchewan, so I don't need to tell you about Canada, but if I'm living up there in the prairie lands, I got a late coming spring and I am really cold. So those are plants that are extremely hardy, very good disease resistance, and very easy to grow. So you might consider that bush type cherry for an option as well, okay? So look at our rootstocks on cherries, you know, for us are going to be essentially 100% dwarfs. There's what we call a Gisela rootstock. It's been out for probably 20, 25 years for me doing this for a living. That's the best superior dwarf rootstock on cherry. All of our cherries are grafted on that. We get all of ours local right here in the Skagit Valley. That would be the superior root system, again, for a smaller, high production tree. If I went over to any orchard producer for cherry, that's exactly the same rootstock that they're utilizing in their crops to pick and sell at wholesale levels. So that's the superior one to use, same one that we have as well, okay? The new one this year that came out, you know, if I give you a couple of heads up, the last member of that bush cherry is one called Crimson Passion. You can probably find it online, look a little information. We do have that available here at the nursery, but my guy put them into a tree form, so they'll be just a little bit off the ground and not the shrub that I picked up a minute ago. I think we'll see the shrubs here in another season as well as an option for something if you just want to have a small bush type cherry. But excellent fruit to try. If you know cherries, nothing's worse than having to cover your tree with 30 feet of netting to keep the birds out. So if you can watch it for ripening time, maybe let them share a few and you get a few. Everybody's happy campers that way. But certainly watch the birds when we get to production time, because they will like to borrow a few from you as they start to produce, okay? We'll do a plums here next. So I got one branch I brought in to show you. And plum would be very similar to our same discussion we just had on cherry. So if I look at a plum tree, again, I can follow that same cycle. I cut this off the trunk. I've got aged wood as I move out. You can look again, all that 1-year-old wood, I can already see the color swelling. The plums are pretty early blooming up here. We might have a little bit of flower out in the yard here in a week or two on most of the plum trees. So if I look at that, this again on the 1-year-old wood is where I'm going to get my production. So I have to be real careful that winter. Again, what am I pruning? Thinning it out, great. Getting structure issues fixed, great. But if I go in and I head this all off on my tree every winter, I'm cutting off the majority of my fruit producing wood, and I'm not going to get much to eat that season. So plum is one you want to leave that 1-year-old wood alone and kind of prune for that reason, okay? So plums are a little bit different than the cherries in that we have two main groups of plums. So we would have European type plums. Some people might call them plum prunes, usually more oblong in shape or oval in shape, not so round. Very good eating. You can dry them, make prunes. The most popular tree selling here is good old Italian plum, or Italian plum prune. We sell more than that than any other tree on the property, and those are plants that are self-fertile. So if I choose a European plum like Italian or yellow egg or Brooks, there's a few options out there. I would have production on one tree. So if I'm in limited space again, lean towards the European style plums, and I can save some room for a different fruit tree in there. If we go to Japanese plum, now I have to have cross-pollination again. So I have to pick two distinct different varieties and have those planted in my yard so the bees can visit both trees and cross-pollinate. I get fruit on both of them. So that would be ones like Beauty and Shiro and Satsuma. There's a number of good Japanese plums that we carry as well. So just keep that in mind if you're a plum lover, to choosing which variety, depending on how much space you have. Maybe it's just one room for a European. Oh, I got lots of room. Well, let's get a couple of Japanese then and do it that way, okay? Maybe as long as we're talking about the plums, I'll mention, a lot of people probably ask at the end, how far do I have to plant these plants away? How far can I go? Do I have to plant them right next to each other? I don't know that there's a golden rule, but I have always sworn by 100 feet, and I don't want a man-made object in between me or between the two trees. So I don't want one on one side of my house and one on the other kind of thing, if that makes sense. So if I'm setting up an orchard, and I have that 20, 15, 20, 25-foot spacing, I don't necessarily have to pack them, side by side, although that's ideal to make it easier for the bees. Certainly works. But I'd say as long as you're within 100 feet, those bees are going to find those flowers and get your cross-pollination done for you, okay? So plums, we did the European and the Japanese. If we kind of throw in a couple other fruits to that same discussion, we'll do peaches real quick. Now, I'd be at the beginning, mentioned Eastern Washington. My wife, bless her heart, drives straight over to Yakima every year to pick up her organic peach stash, so we can do some canning and things. Most of the stuff that you would find in the grocery store or in Eastern Washington just is not going to grow in Western Washington. I hate to tell you, we're way too wet. It kills me when I go visit Costco's and some of those non-nursery stores, to be honest with you. The varieties of fruit trees they sell you folks, because I would give you next to zero chance of ever growing a Red Haven peach or this kind of apricot or whatever. It just does not do Western Washington. The one peach that does is Frost. So we sell, again, probably 100 Frost peach trees a year, and that is the one tree that I would have in Western Washington. It's been around since the 70s. It was found pretty close to us here in Granite Falls, Washington. It's a local variety. We get them grown local. That's the one you want to try if you're going to try peach, is get Frost. I'm going to grab one. Again, you can see the bare root. I just pulled them out of soil. It doesn't change anything. I've got that root system. I've got that graft. If you were listening, keep that soil down below here. With the peach, we want to make sure we have drainage. If you plant this in an area that gets real wet in the winter, puddles with water, heavy clay, it is going to struggle, okay? Now, this is that aha moment for the gardener, because I'm going to be brutally honest with you. If you buy a Frost peach, and the next couple we'll talk about as well, you need to give it a little bit extra attention. I can't just plant this in my yard and walk away. So if I'm going to grow something like peach, it must be pruned every year and it must be sprayed every year. We don't ever use anything systemic. I call it murder, death, kill around here on fruit trees. We want to use something that's much more mild, natural, organic if we can. But peach, always the issue is peach leaf curl is the main one. And that's going to blow around in the wind and the rain every single spring, no matter what you do. I have to get it pruned. Ideally, you took this tree home today, the staff here would prune it for you. But I literally want to knock all these branches back I got bad pruners on me here today. I want to knock all these branches back about 20%, okay? So if you see where I'm pruning, I'm making that nice cut right above a side bud that's going out away from the center. I'm not going to cut there and have my branch go through the middle of the tree, if you can see that. So if I go along this peach, these are really nice sized starter trees. These will probably be in the ground about 7 feet tall right now, and I probably will get a few peaches on this the first season. But when we do this, I want to try to shave some of those young twigs off every single late January, February before it blooms. Everything that happens with peach starts at the tip of the branch and works its way down as far as disease. So if I get those tips out from the wet winter, I'm going to have much healthier bud break, a successful bloom, and I'm going to have some peaches come. So peaches are self-fertile. I only have to plant one frost peach, but I definitely want to sign up for a little bit of pruning. And I also want to get this sprayed. Before it flowers, I want to make sure I get a good spray with liquid cop or a similar copper type fungicide on there that will keep that peach leaf curl to a minimum and make sure that I start the season clean. Now, this is where I'm saying I would dormant spray, you know, all my fruit trees once every winter to make sure I start clean. With the peach, if you're taking this home and you want to have a great success with it, what I'm telling you is do it now, let it bloom, drops its petals. A month later, we do it one more time. A month after that, we do it again. And we try to get to summer, you know, spraying 3 or 4 times here as we go through the season. It doesn't take you long, but you'll just spend a few minutes doing it here once a month. I'm going to have a much healthier tree and probably a lot more success if I can control the spraying on that through this wet, rainy season in spring and get into the summer when it's a little bit warmer, okay? So that's your peach, and it's exactly the same conversation as the next two, because I'm going to mention apricots and nectarines. So if we talk apricots, exactly the same as a peach. I want to do that extra pruning and a little bit extra spraying to keep them healthy and pick the right variety for Western Washington. For years and years, it was only one, Puget Gold. You know, we had one of those growing up in our yard back in the day. I've seen a bunch of them around. Again, if I can spray and prune properly and monitor it, I will have a good apricot that I can pick here. The newer one that we carry, both of these, is one called Harglow. And we're lucky here, you know, in Washington, a pretty good fruit producing state. You know, we've got a research station in Western Washington, not too far up the freeway from us, that spends their time testing different varieties of this and that. Do they do better in Western Washington? Are they too wet over here? And that's where excuse me, Harglow would come from. Maybe one that's got a little better disease resistance. Still a great, you know, apricot, you know, as far as a home eater, you know, great fresh apricot. But again, the varieties you see in the grocery store, we got to head over that pass here in Washington and drop down over there in Wenatchee and buy them from a grower, because the Tetons and this and that, there's a lot of good varieties of apricot we would want to get in Eastern Washington, not Western Washington. Nectarine, you know, we started carrying one called Hearty Red. That's the only one that I would recommend trying here in Western Washington. But if you like your nectarines, it's exactly the same conversation. A little bit extra pruning, watching that fungus spray during this wet season, and monitoring the tree a little bit more, not just planting it, walking away like we maybe could get away with some apples and some pears and some different type of fruit, okay? So nectarine would be the third one in that. So all those prune the same. You know, if we lump kind of peach, nectarine, apricot the same, it's the same discussion on pruning. It's the same one-year-old wood that blooms, that produces my fruit. I've got to watch for the same issues in the wet weather over here. And all those are self-fertile. I want to make sure that's clear, because sometimes this fruit class is a little overwhelming. You might have thought this and this, and why can't I put this with that tree? I only have to have one peach and I'll get fruit. Same with apricot, same with nectarine. Those are all self-fertile. Make it easy on those three, okay? So let's look. We'll talk a couple other things here for a minute, because I'm guessing there's going to be a whole lot of questions today, so I'm going to leave some extra time for questions. Let's talk nuts for a minute. You know, there's some good options for nuts here in Western Washington. We carry a few. I think my dad's watching this today, so he'll probably thank me for mentioning him, but he is the almond master, and he got me onto a tree called Hall's Hearty Almond, and he gets great almond crops down, and he lives over in the peninsula, gets a bunch of good almonds every year on a good hardy tree up here. It's one that we carry. They sell out fast, so don't wait too long to come get one of those. But hardy almond might be something kind of fun to try. You know, you'd harvest those in the fall, let them dry inside, you can crack them open, and you got your own fresh almonds. You can get crazy and add some seasoning and make them your own style too. But hardy almond would be one option. We carry a English walnut called Cascade Walnut. I will warn you, you know, the Halsar Helm is a pretty big tree. I bet you'll get up there 20 feet by 20 feet. Not something you're going to keep dwarf. The walnut's twice that. You know, walnut's very slow growing. It takes years to get nuts on it. But I've seen walnut, you've probably seen them old pictures, you know, 40, 50, even 60 feet tall. So, you know, walnut's not one we're going to pop in the front yard by the door. We probably need a little bit more room to let that develop out with some property or a large backyard, kind of as a nice, beautiful shade tree. So take a look at walnuts as well. Up here in the Northwest, huge filbert country. So we do carry some great filbert nuts or hazelnuts. You know, being so close to Oregon is the capital of hazelnut production, period. So I always kind of tell this quick tale with hazelnuts. The issue in the Northwest is native hazelnuts or Western hazelnut is always the carrier for Filbert Blight. That's a disease that there's no answer for. The tree has to be cut down, burned, and gone. There's no spray to fix it. So Filbert Blight is a huge issue down in Oregon when you're producing some of this stuff commercially. And as a homeowner, say you live down in, you know, the Portland or Willamette Valley area, you know, for years you couldn't have a filbert nut in your yard because of the orchards next door did not want you having a diseased plant that would infect theirs, if that makes sense. So the point of it is, you know, Oregon State down in Corvallis spent a lot of time developing filbert blight immunity. You know, if you think back 60 years, nobody had elm trees because of Dutch elm disease. Now man has conquered this filbert blight. So the point I'm saying is our trees that we carry are filbert blight immune. So all the varieties you see on our list that we have for sale here at Sunnyside have no chance of getting filbert blight. So I'm totally comfortable planting filberts and not worrying about disease. You know, 10 years ago, I would have said, boy, you live on a green belt. I don't know that I would grow filbert because that problem's going to blow out in the wind from the native filberts, get on your ornamental one, and you're going to struggle. So filberts, we have to have two different varieties to cross-pollinate. I want to make sure that's clear. The walnut, it's good on its own. Almond, good on its own. If I want to grow hazelnuts or filbert, I have 4 varieties back there. You would need to pick 2 of those 4 to cross-pollinate each other and get nuts on both trees. So right now, the filberts are almost getting ready to bloom. It's a little bit different than typical trees. If you know filbert, we would drop those little catkins down. Those are wind pollinated, not pollinated by bees. So as long as we have 2 trees that bloom in the same time frame, the wind blows that pollen from tree to tree as it circulates, then I've got nuts taken care of on both of them, okay? So take a look at the filberts. That would be another option as far as nuts for you. Figs, I'll mention real quick. We don't have a lot of figs in yet. I've got the first bunch coming up here in about 2 weeks. You can grow great figs in Western Washington, but you know, at the beginning we talked about minimum 6 hours of sunlight. If you really want to grow figs successfully, I would go as much sun as you possibly can. The best figs I've seen have been in total southwest exposure, all afternoon sun. If you're up kind of even close to a building, getting reflected heat, even better. A fig should get you, you know, 2 crops. Even here in Washington, you should be picking a little bit of figs here midsummer, and then having another one in the mid-late fall, if you've got it in a happy spot. There is, I almost said it because I say it every year. There is one dwarf fig that comes out this year called Little Ruby that we will have that you can grow in a pot, on the deck, in a small garden, maybe 6-8 feet tall is all. But all the other figs, there really isn't a dwarf. So fig is a pretty big tree. We can prune it hard and not affect the growth of it. But I'm going to leave probably a 20 by 20 area for a nice mature fig tree. If you really want to grow some good figs for fresh eating, give it some room to grow and don't go in and saw it off every year. Fig grows pretty fast and gets a lot of root system. So give it some room to develop. For us, you know, we try all kinds of figs up here. I bet you this year, the list has got a number of them on there. You'll find on our website, but we'll even have more than that. We'll probably be adding a couple varieties to that here as we get into spring. I would say at least a good 8 or 10 different figs, dark fleshed ones, light fleshed ones, some old school ones, some new school ones. And if that Little Ruby is the one that caught your eye, I would highly recommend emailing right away and leaving your name, because when they come in, there won't be a whole bunch this first year, and they will probably be gone pretty quickly. So that'll be a tough find here for the first season. Lots of other fruits around. You certainly can bring some things up, you know, pawpaws and kumquats and on and on and on as we do questions. But we'll do that in a sec. We'll just talk just a couple more things real quick, and then we'll get into the question time. You know, I kept talking about, you know, pollination, and it's all about mason bees up here. You know, if you know mason bees, awesome. Then you know the power of the pollinator. Essentially, we don't have pollinator, we don't have mason bee. You've got no fruit, you've got no vegetables, you've got no anything, to be honest with you. That is our food provider. So the better you can do in your yard, you know, with organic and natural things and not using chemicals, the bees are going to be happier. The mason bees are the ones that are out doing our fruit trees. It is way too cold. You're not going to see honeybees and bumblebees and this bee and that bee. It's orchard mason bees that are out in this cold weather. So if you have tried them before, awesome. You probably got great production already in your little orchard at home. If you haven't, I would really recommend looking up some things online on those. We would have hives here. They're very easy to do. They don't sting people. They look like flies, not even like bees, to be honest with you. But if I have a mason bee hive set up, I've got my own little private pollinator supply. You know, those guys, we would set up our hive, you know, kind of facing in that south direction. We don't want to tuck it in the shade. We don't want to hide it somewhere. I usually would tell people, just get a short post, get yourself a little hive or make your own, come buy the cocoons with the bees in them, and off you go. You know, if I have that sited where it's facing south, that little bit of winter sun that we start getting is going to wake those guys up here in February, and they're going to be out buzzing around taking care of my apple and my pear and this and that and the rest of it, so that I get the fruit. You know, a lot of people will come to me and say, man, my trees are healthy. I got full bloom every year. I got nothing. And really the only answer to that is you do not have the bees in there to take care of it for you. So whether it's so fertile or you need a cross-pollinizer, it doesn't matter. We have to get those mason bees into our landscape so that they can take care of the pollinizing for us, okay? So very easy to do. You know, look online. You can find some information. Email us questions. Come down. We have cocoons in. Our little hives and nests and things should be here pretty quick. They're supposed to be here a week ago, but they'll be here pretty quick, and then we would have everything you need to kind of set up your own little mason bee hive. Very, very easy to do, okay? I kept talking about dormant spraying. You know, these are the two. There's a lot of good sprays out there, and I'm not going to tell you if you've got something in the garage you like, awesome. But if you're going to buy something, I would really look at those two, okay? So we have Horticultural Oil, which is 100% organic, OMRI listed, best thing you could do here in the wintertime. When I spray oil onto a tree with no foliage, what happens? The oil collects and it runs and it literally coats all of the branching, the buds, all of it. That cuts off oxygen between whatever's stuck to my tree that I don't want and the open air. So I can eliminate a lot of bug larvae. I can smother out scale. It'll help a little bit with disease. That's a great way, especially again, if I had a problem with my fruit tree in 2020, okay, I got a little note in my calendar. I had scab. Let's get that attacked early so I don't get it again. This is a great way to get a head start. You take the horticultural oil. The liquid cop is the major disease part of that. I think that's the best copper spray. This is a little bit different formulation of copper. Copper sulfate is kind of the old one, and it would turn to that blue goo in your sprayer, and you clog the tip, and it was always hard to mix. This is much more water soluble. It's an ammonium copper. If I could put these two in the exact same sprayer and apply them out once, and I've got everything covered. And this copper will last you about 30 days, even in the rain like today. I get it on a dry day, let it dry on in a few hours, and I've literally got a shield built on all my buds and wood. Anything blows in from my neighbor who doesn't take care of her trees, or down the street, I've got the shield where that little fungus is not going to have a chance to get a foothold and start to attack my plant, okay? So the cool thing with both of those is A, they make great dormant sprays, but B, I can use those two products almost all year long. It'll tell you right in the label, do not use one over 90 degrees. And I always kind of chuckle and smile. How many days last year was it 90 degrees in our little island here in Western Washington? Maybe 5. So if we avoid, to be safe, maybe you avoid the, mid-late July to early September. You shouldn't have to do a lot of spraying then anyway. I can really get ahead of things all winter and in spring and during the season by using those two products are a great way to go. I like to make life easy, and those are the two things I found that I can put right in the same sprayer and apply at once and not have to do one, clean everything out, and then go do the other one next. So save yourself some time. That's a great little dormant spray mixture to use, okay? So we'll go talk discounts here for the class. So you saw me show the EV Stone fruit berry vine fertilizer a little bit earlier. This is the little pouch that'll do quite a few trees. We also have 15-pound bags. If you've got an existing orchard or you're planting quite a few trees, get the bigger bag. 20% off is a great price for probably the best. It is the best fertilizer brand in the market, I think, EV Stone. But this is a great one specifically to use for our edible creatures. So fruit berry vine food. You saw me just mention the dormant sprays. 20% off those as well. We just got a whole bunch more in, so we'd have you covered. If you want to come down and grab some, we would have those in the store as well. And then right now, you saw me pulling trees out of pots. So we don't do the old rotten sawdust bed anymore like we used to. We plant all of our trees in good quality soil when they come in. But here for the next, 6 weeks or so until we start to break bud, you're able to come down here and our staff just pops it out of the pot, soaks it in a really nice little fertilizer blend for you in our trough back there, put it in a bag, and you can take it home and make it easy for transport. No soil, no big pot, anything like that. You take it home, you pop it right in the ground, and off we go. A lot of people are probably going to ask, the bare root is 30% off. So whatever the trees tag back there, you can save a huge amount of money just taking that tree home. We keep the pot, we keep the dirt, everybody's happy kind of thing, okay? So watch, take advantage of the bare root, because I don't know what the weather's going to do for us in Western Washington, but typically, sometime in early to mid-March, it's done. I monitor the root system here, and once we start to see filament roots coming out in the soil and plants are breaking bud, there'll be no more bare root. You got to take the whole thing home as is and plant it right away. Someone can guarantee is going to ask in bare root, so I'm going to say this really clearly. If I take a bare root tree home, I want to plant it right away. I'm not taking it home, putting it in my garage until the weekend and then popping it in. They have to stay wet and outside. So say you came down today, I'm taking it home and planting. Something comes up and I can't do it. Just take that tree out and lay it on your ground outside somewhere, shovel some dirt and cover the root system. You're fine with that. You go back and do it in a week or 10 days or whenever you can, but do not take it home and leave it in the bag or set it in my garage or leave it in the car. If it dries out and desiccates, it is not going to grow. We want to make sure those roots stay wet, okay? So again, those are your 3 sales for this week. You've got from today, the start of the class day here when it's over, and you've got all the way through the week till Friday to take advantage. 20% off the fruit fertilizer, 20% off both the dormant sprays, and then the 30% off the bare root. We will run that bare root sale longer in the spring, but I'm going to tell you right now, last year was insanity for fruit tree sales, and it is already insanity here for the first 2 weeks we've had them in. I can guarantee you come down here in 2-3 weeks and ask me for a frost peach or an Italian plum or some of these popular ones, I am out, and this is not something that we can reorder and get more. I took everything I possibly could the second week of January. So come down early, take advantage of the sale, and get what you want. That way you get the Cosmic Crisp Apple. Those didn't even last 3 days last year. We have more this year, but there's certain plants like that that will run out fairly quickly. Literally, what's today? The 30th? Our trees came, I believe it was the 14th of January, and we are already sold out of 2 pairs. And that is incredible, because typically we would have enough to get into summer and have some around for you. So take a look at the list, make your choices, email us, call us. We can do it over the phone, even get you paid for it. You come down and pick them up in a day or 2, whatever you need, but get those varieties picked up pretty quick to make sure you get what you want, okay? Um, Today is obviously fruit day. We're going to do questions here in 1 second, but I'll just tell you in 2 weeks will be another kind of big weekend on the Zoom class for us. So the 13th on Saturday, I'll be talking about berries. So the other half of kind of that edible landscape, we'll be going through all the berries that we can grow, Western Washington, everything across the board. And then that Sunday, Valentine's Day, is a perfect day to do roses. We always try to do the rose class right around Valentine's Day. Instead of buying your lady a handful of dead roses in a week, come down and get her a nice rose bush you can grow on the ground. So we would have both those classes. I'll be teaching the 13th berries, and the 14th will be for the roses for the first season. Okay. So with that, I've talked enough, right, Nicole?
It's great. You covered a lot today. It's good.
Yeah, let's try to do some questions. I think we're doing pretty good on time. Yeah, so let's do some questions.
So we've had a lot of questions about growing these fruit trees in pots. Do you have like simple tips on how big the pot has to be? Are there certain varieties that will or won't work?
Well, if we got, long-term, not a lot of the traditional fruit trees are going to grow in a pot, unless we talk about a massive pot. But let's just say most people like the size of like a half wine barrel, whiskey barrel. That's a really good size container. If I buy the bush cherry, the columnar apples, which I actually probably should have shown you one. I got one back here. But that's the columnar apple that will grow very narrow and upright. That's a smaller plant. Mini dwarf apples, not dwarf, but mini dwarf. I could probably get away with a very large container like that. If you're talking for 3, 4, 5 years, sure. We can grow any fruit tree in a pot for a few years. But if I'm talking long term, the selection is going to be a little bit more limited to that mini dwarf apple, columnar type apples. And those bush cherries would be towards the top of my list.
Excellent. We have a lot of questions about persimmons. Do they need multiple varieties in order to cross-pollinate? Do you need to spray them like you would other fruit trees?
Persimmons actually grow pretty good here in Western Washington. The issue, they're all self-fertile, so we don't have to worry about production. The issue with us is length of summer. And if you live here, you're chuckling because I don't know when the sun ends, but at some point in October to early November, we're not going to get a lot more heat and sun. And the problem with Asian type persimmons, Fuyu, Achia, there's a lot of good ones, and we'll have them here. Is it kind of like the fig discussion? I want maximum sun to try to get that guy to ripen, because some of those persimmons don't ripen until well into November. And if we get a good hard frost, you may not get much fruit that season, just to be brutally honest with you. But I can just plant one. I don't have to worry about two. We will have some of that in here. Probably will be about a month. We can't get persimmons till a little later. What you might look at are hardier persimmons. There's great American persimmons that taste just as good as some of the Asian or Japanese ones. And we also get Russian persimmons in. Very, very hardy, much earlier ripening. Now we're into that late September to mid-October time frame. I'm probably got a better chance of having fruit to pick. They're not exactly what you might find in the grocery store, they're the same, but same good quality persimmon type fruit.
Switching gear a little bit, quinces. We've had some questions. Are they in the same category as apples? Are they spur fruits? Do you need a cross-pollinator for those?
Yeah, look, the quince, if you're looking for fruiting quinces, I'll be honest, as I kind of chuckle, I like them, and I used to carry them every year, and nobody bought them here, so I didn't buy any again this year. We used to carry a couple of varieties, but we always had them left at the end of the season. You can find them around. If you want even quince shrubs will get a small quince fruit on them. But if you want really production type quince, look on some of the online sites. They can probably mail you one, like Rain Tree Nurseries, a local place in Washington. There's some good ones around. And it is a little bit like an apple. It would be usually 1 year old, not 2-year-old wood though. I would see those spurs where I would get again that cluster of flower and then a nice quince production.
I know you kind of covered all of this in detail, but a quick synopsis perhaps. People can plant trees now, correct?
Absolutely. Right. If the ground, again, we're supposed to get maybe a week of cold where we're at here coming up in a couple of weeks. I don't know if it is or is going to happen. if the ground is frozen, just wait. You know, it's not going to be more than 2 or 3 days. And if it's frozen here, it's probably that much frozen and not much down below. I would absolutely take stuff home right away and get it in the ground. You're going to get root development. It's going to be happy. You get it staked up and ready to go. You're going to have a happy plant when it breaks bud for spring.
And you can transplant now as well?
Yep. Yep. Any transplanting, whether it's fruit or any plant, dividing stuff, plant transplanting time. This is prime time here up till about 1st of March or so.
And you want to prune now before it starts to bud out, right?
Yeah, you know, and again, some people, travel south and go find the sunshine. More power to you if you can do that in the winter. There's a lot of reasons. If you don't get to it, it's not the end of the world. Let it flower once we have petal drop on the ground, then do your pruning. You can see where you're starting to get some production anyway that way. Ideally, I would rather have you go out here in that late January to early mid-February and get your structure pruning done and get it tidied up before it breaks bud and goes into flower.
And when's the best time to fertilize them?
If you haven't fed, if you're taking one home, feed it when you plant it. And then like I mentioned earlier, go back and feed it a second time in that mid-May, early June timeframe. If you have existing trees, I would still follow that same protocol. Give me a good dose of fertilizer here in the next month, say. That gives me a nice flush in spring, a healthy tree. If I go back and feed it a second time there in that late spring time, now I have a nice flush of fresh wood for the next year to pick.
I know we talked about espaliers that have multiple varieties on one tree, but are there trees that have multiple fruits, like, say an apple and a pear? Are those real? Do they work?
Yeah, they are real. It's not a myth. I'll be honest, I just don't. They call them fruit cocktail. And we have access to them. I know some nurseries up around our neck of the woods will probably sell them to you. I think they grow very strange because things grow at different rates. And when you start to put a plum and a cherry and a peach and an apricot, it just is a funky looking plant, to be brutally honest. And two, I really worry about disease on those. Most of the selections I've seen probably don't have the best apricot, don't have the best peach. And I think you're going to struggle. Again, you saw me pause with the peach, the nectarine, and the apricot. If you were signing up, here's your signature. I'm a gardener, and yes, I will put in some extra work. Have at it. I think you'd be okay trying the fruit cocktail if you want to try one. If you're going to plant it in the yard and walk away and then come back in June and say, what's wrong with my tree? You'll probably be a little disappointed.
Excellent. There's been a few questions about glucose to water fruit trees.
About what?
Glucose.
Glucose?
Mm-hmm.
That's not something I've heard as much. It might be more of an orchard thing. I can certainly look up some information on that. That's not one that I've tried. It's probably glucose is just sugar. I don't know if that adds a little bit extra to the sugar content of your tree. If you're using a good fertilizer, watering it adequately in the dry season in the summer here, you're going to have good quality fruit.
We had a question about wild cherries. Do they pollinate for other cherries, or are they kind of in their own?
A little bit on their own because of the bloom time. Most cherries bloom pretty early, but that's why we're talking about this bush cherry thing. That essentially is a derivative off of prairie cherry up in the much colder areas that the man spent a lot of time getting the sugar content up to make it extra sweet for us to eat. It's just a little bit different bloom time. So I wouldn't, again, they're so fertile, so it doesn't really matter. If I've got a wild one, great. Maybe the birds will have that a little bit more and I can have my ornamental one in my yard.
If you have specifically if an apple tree that's older, like, significantly older and stopped fruiting, can you graft a new variety on it so that it will continue to fruit?
You could as well. I would probably have an arborist or somebody who knows come and take a look at the tree. If it has an issue that why it's not producing, if it's black rot or something with the trunk, it would be a waste of your time to graft onto that trunk. If it's just old and tired, because we all get old and tired at some point, yeah, putting some fresh wood on there would certainly help. We don't carry any grafting supplies, I'll tell you right now, at the nursery. I would send you out around here out to a place like Stuber's, a little place in downtown Snohomish. They would have grafting wax and tape and all the supplies if you wanted to play around with a little grafting.
You mentioned figs and planting them closer to the house. How close,
Yep.
you know, in order to get the advantage of the reflected heat, how close should they be so it's not too close, but you still get that heat?
Yeah. You know, again, it doesn't, we're not talking 3 feet away from the foundation. That doesn't need to be, although I've seen some people do that and even kind of half espalier them on that side of the house. If you planted it, say 10 feet away, you know, give it some room to grow on both sides. It's just that afternoon sun, getting that extra little bit of reflection, especially off a lighter colored house, is really going to help heat that tree up and get those figs to ripen a little quicker.
What about fig trees? Are those self-fertile?
Figs are always self-fertile. Absolutely.
Nice. And then we had a question about kumquats.
Mm-hmm.
How tips on those?
Yeah, you can grow those in Western Washington. Again, I would watch a little bit in the wet weather. It's not something we carry, to be honest with you, but you can certainly find them around. I would look, if you're local, if the person's local that's asking here in Western Washington, I would go straight on to Rain Tree Nursery. That's a local place down by Mount Rainier. They do some mail order. They would have some of those really cool fruits that are probably a little better suited for this climate. The other place I would look at, kind of sounds funny, but it's a place called One Green World. You can find them online. They're based right outside of Portland, just down in Oregon, same exact climate as ours. And they would have, again, some of the stranger pawpaws and kumquats and maybe a few different persimmons as well.
Going back to fertilizing, if you have an established tree, what's the best way to go about fertilizing it? Do you mix it around the base? You know,
yep, that's a great question. So if I've got an old tree, I mean, let's just pretend here, I got about a 2-foot trunk here. I'm not dumping my fertilizer right around that wood. I need to get it out where the root system is establishing. So if you look at what we would call the drip line, so if I look at the perimeter of my tree where the branches go to, I would come inside of that about 2 to 3 feet, and that's where I would sprinkle my fertilizer in a nice pattern all the way around the perimeter.
And can you show us that fertilizer bag one more time? A good recommended fertilizer?
Yeah, EB Stone is the way to go. This is the best company. It's about 30 years for me now. That's fruit berry vine food. And again, I'm planting a tree, or I got 2 or 3 or 4. This will probably last you for the year. If you've got a number of them, I would take advantage of the sale and highly recommend getting the 15-pound bag. That's got 15 pounds of pleasure in there. That'll really help out the trees.
We have a lot of questions about dormant sprays. The best ones, if you can show us those again, when and how to do it, you know, the ready to use versus the concentrate.
Well, again, these are the two that I like these days. It's been a few years now because I can mix them together. That's both made by Monterey, Liquid Cop and Horticultural Oil. These are two I can put in the same sprayer. You got all your dilution rates right in the information. Most of this stuff's just a couple tablespoons to a gallon. And whether I have a, you know, regular pump sprayer or a hose end type sprayer, I can apply that very, very easily here as a preventative measure in the dormant season. You know, again, I'm not trying to tell you to go to your garage and throw everything else away and come buy those, though we'd love you to come buy those. If you have other stuff, you know, sulfur is traditionally a great one. I think it smells like, you know what, so I tend not to use it anymore. But sulfur is an option. There's other forms of copper. You know, use what you got, and then maybe the next time you're in the mood, try this out, because I just think it lasts a little bit longer and it's a little bit easier to apply for most homeowners.
And I know there's been a lot of specific questions about, you know, I've got these little bugs or I've got rust, things like that. We don't like to answer those types of tell you what you have without seeing pictures. So I've been telling a few of you in the chat, but send us an email at sunnyside@msn.com with some pictures and some details about what's going on. Trevor would be happy to start a conversation with you over email and best identify what's happening and what the best solution is. So,
I mean, I'll just add to that. You know, again, it's all about climate. If this is local people in Western Washington, you know, we fight disease more over here just because of the weather. It's not the end of the world. We can still grow all this stuff successfully, but we're going to monitor stuff like apple scab and mildew and maybe some things you'll never see in Eastern Washington. As an example, I'm going to fight bugs probably more over there. On this side of the mountains, you know, probably the one thing you really got to watch, you know, if we took apple, it's apple maggot. I get more people email me about, God, my fruit looked great, and I cut one open and I got this brown streak down the middle of my fruit and I can't eat it because no one wants to eat a nasty worm in the middle of the apple. You know, apple maggot is one you have to hang traps for. Most of the other stuff, aphids, you know, we could go on and on. You know, those are all things that I can find something natural or organic to take care of in the season, after bloom, anytime I want. I can find something. Apple maggot is impossible because it's a fly who sneaks in and lays little eggs in your apple. You can't catch her. You're not going to be able to stand out there and go, I see you coming. We have to hang those pheromone traps and get them out in April. So when she starts coming in to lay her little babies in my fruit, I will catch her on the pheromone trap and then you'll win. If you don't, that's probably the one thing that we just don't have an answer for spring.
Is neem oil the same as horticultural oil? And if what's the difference?
No, a little bit different. Neem oil obviously comes from the neem tree, and that's a great organic solution for a lot of issues. It does not work as a dormant spray. That is something we would use in season on roses. Fruit tree, you can use it on a lot of stuff. In the dormant season, we have to use a spray oil that will last in the weather, and the horticultural oil is the best option for that.
Can you talk about soil considerations, the best way to amend your soil and how to go about that?
Well, if you know, let's just say, you know, I'm down here today. Mr. Jones came and bought a tree, and he says, "Man, I'm going to put that right in my front yard." And we're going to ask him, you know, how's your soil? Does it drain well? How's your organic content? You don't have to go get a mini soil lab and test all that. Is not the answer. But what we want to make sure is we've got drainage. So I'm going to dig always a bigger hole than I think I need. I'm going to have my pile of native soil that I just dug out, right? I got my bag or bale of compost. I'm going to mix that 1/3 with my native soil as I backfill and mix everything together with my fertilizer. And then I will always use compost or something as a mulch over the top of that new root zone a couple inches deep that will keep my tree happy that first summer. So at least go with the third. You know, planting compost you cannot lose with. If you've got compost around, you make your own, great. You know, steer manure, I'm not gonna, you know, as long as it's aged, you know, steer manure, chicken manure, I can go on and on. There's a lot of great amendments, but if you want the fail-safe one, I would always get, it's the same brand we carry, EB Stone Organics, 100% organic, pure compost. It is beautiful stuff to use for planting everything, including the fruit trees.
There's been a lot of questions, so we're going to do our best to kind of get through them in the next 20 minutes. But I know there's been a lot of people asking, you know, my tree was fruiting and now it's not, or it's not producing as heavily as it was before, as I'd like. Send us email with those pictures and kind of what's going on. It's specific situations and we'd love to help you with that, but it's hard to answer kind of generalized here. So without having to respond to all of you in the chat, send us some emails with pictures. Trevor's here all weekend and he'd be happy to answer and start conversations with you that way. Trevor, will Asian pears cross-pollinate European? Do they have to stay with any? Yes.
2 thumbs up for that one. Yeah, we can mix again. I mentioned out with the pears, I can get Asian pear, European pear, or these new hybrid pears like Maxie and Ready Robin. I can take any one of those 3 and they work together.
And then can you tell us what kind of growth do the fruit produce on? Is it 1 year, 2 year growth? Does it change depending on the fruit?
It changes on the fruit. As we went through things, let's see if we can simplify this. If we took apples and all the different types of pears, those I would essentially call your 2-year wood. I have to develop new growth. Let me pull my branch out here. Okay. I have to develop new growth from last season, and I have to let it sit for 1 year, and then I get all of my spur development. Okay, so it's a 2-year process. Everything else we showed you, the peach, the cherry, the plums, apricots, nectarines, all that business is one season. So if I looked at again, my plum branch as an example, you know, this is obviously old wood. If I look at what grew last year, what have I got right on there? Here's all flower buds off 1-year-old wood that I'm going to start to get to pick fruit on this next season. So 1-year wood on all those other fruits. Maybe you call them stone fruits, and you know, the things that have maybe pits in them might be an easy way to remember. The spur fruits like the apples and pears, I've got to have a 2-year process.
And do we need to put mulch on the ground under your fruit tree? What are your recommendations about that?
If I was looking at the ground level, yes, I just mentioned when I planted, I would always keep a little 3, if you can, 4-foot circle mulch. I would add to that, a lot of people, and it's not the end of the world, we did the same thing, our family in Clallam, a lot of people will plant trees in the pasture, in the grass. You know, you've got property. I don't want grass growing right up against my roots. I want to have a grass-free zone around that fruit tree, at least a 3-foot circle. And I would go a little more if you can. Grass is the greatest robber of nutrients that's ever existed. And if you went and fed your fruit tree, that grass is going to take most of the fertilizer and not the fruit, as well as the water. So try to leave a little, you know, grass-free zone if you're planting in a lawn area. If it's in a garden, absolutely mulch. I mean, if I mulch that thing, if it's bark, make sure you put extra food down because bark will take a lot of nitrogen out. But if I have bark, compost is the best way to go. You can use all kinds of good mulches. It will really help you that summer with moisture retention too.
And what's good watering tips for the summer, for the hotter months with fruit trees?
Well, you know, again, we don't want to ever let our fruit trees get drought stressed. If I'm a plant and I get drought stressed, the first thing I'm going to do as a fruit tree is drop my fruit. I'm going to say, okay, first thing that goes is the fruit, the flower. The second thing is going to be the foliage, and I try to go dormant early. So it's not that you have to, you know, go out and water these things every day. You know, say you planted a new tree this year, you know, I would try to ask you, in our climate, it's probably only June, July, August, maybe September. You know, check it once a week. You know, if you can, if you've got it mulched properly, you should not have to water it more than once a week. If you're maybe in a little bit warmer climate, Eastern washing, absolutely, you'd need to water it a little bit more than that. But once a week is plenty on a new tree. If you've got an older established fruit tree that you think maybe gets a little drought stressed here and there in the summer, you know, I would rather have you soak the daylights out of it infrequently versus this quick little daily blessing thing. A lot of people walk out and, oh, let me just give everything a quick little splash of water. You know, I would say this, if I'm home, I got old fruit trees, I want to make sure they're happy. Say you're out working in the garden on a Saturday, you're out weeding, doing some things, whatever you're doing. I go get my garden hose, turn it on a trickle, okay, not running water, just a trickle, and I would set it on the fruit tree. In another hour, I'd move it here, and I'd move it here, or get a soaker hose and just saturate that one area. Maybe it's twice a month, you know, it's probably plenty, maybe even once a month, you know, if we get a typical weather year around here. But less frequently and much deeper will give you a way better root system and a much happier tree.
Can you plant fruit and nut trees on a slope? How do they do with that?
Yeah, certainly. Again, I would worry, we just talked about water. That's the one thing I would worry about is water running out. So make sure when you plant them, you know, you can still stay, you know, perpendicular to the sky, but I'm going to probably have a little well, if that makes sense, dug out of my hill. So I've got an area for rain to collect, or if I want to go out and feed it, mulch it, water it, I've got an area or a little basin that I can really keep those root systems happy. Once it gets established, fruit trees got pretty good root systems. You're not going to have to worry about that long term, but certainly to start with, really watch the water on the slopes.
I know we talked a little bit about distance earlier, but can you give us a few quick tips in terms of distance away from each of the trees? Can you plant them close to fences? You know, that kind of guidance.
You know, again, if we take that in a couple different levels. So if I'm talking distance, if you can, it's going to depend a little bit on what tree you choose. Some will be a little bigger than others, just naturally, even being dwarf. But if you had a 20-foot, you know, trunk to trunk, there's nothing that's going to break that rule. If you need to get closer than that, and either we're going to have to do a little bit more pruning to keep them separated and keep the air and the sun moving in there. But if you can stay somewhere in that 15, 20, even 25 feet, if you can, more sun, more air means less spray, less disease, less issues long-term. And again, I would rather have you keep your tree pruned this way and let it develop laterally so that I can walk out there and grab some apples and not have to climb on a ladder to get up 15, 20 feet in the air. So that's yard spacing. If you're going against a fence, you know, it could be right up on the fence. I don't know how friendly you are with your neighbor. If they're going to mind it growing over that fence, then cool. You know, everybody's happy. They can pick some here, you can pick some here, and we share with the neighbors. That's not going to matter. You know, look at the trunk long term. If you were 3 feet away from a fence, that's plenty to grow a nice sized fruit tree long term with growth. If we're talking about espalier, which we showed earlier, you know, I would plant that right up against my fence. You know, I'm talking about, you know, probably a foot away, if not, if even that, because I'm going to train that to grow along the fence, almost like a vine that I can keep it low and grow it side to side.
We've had a lot of questions about apple maggots, the socks, the traps,
Yep.
things like that. Few questions. Can you talk about those? Do you need one per tree? Do they affect mason bees?
They do not affect mason bees. Maggot flies, you know, again, I wouldn't hang anything out in my tree yet. You know, they're not waking up until usually the fruit's at least nickel size. So typical spring here, you know, we'd probably be out there in that, you know, early mid-April if you really wanted to be safe. If you buy a trap is always the way I would go. I mean, I'll be honest, if you got the energy and the time and the patience to take those little maggot barriers and wrap every one of your apples, you get the gold star for the day, because I would probably pull, if I had hair, I would probably pull it out. So that's option one. I mean, if you put a barrier on there, you've probably taken care of 99% of your problem. We will have them in. We always get them through the Seattle Fruit Tree Society, and they come in bags, and they're literally like little mini pantyhose is what they are. If you want the easier way, to me, is a pheromone trap. I got my dad on these a few years ago, because you buy it in a box. It comes with 3, which is plenty for an old tree. I would hang them, you know, just above eye level, probably 6 feet in the air, and I would put them in a triangle around the perimeter of my tree. What that is a pheromone lure. So you have the traps forever, but I just replaced the lure the next year. So I just come down and buy the little box of replacement lures, put those in, and I'm done. If I hang that in my tree, we have a biodegradable sticky glue. Some people used to use Tanglefoot. There's a lot of options. It's basically like a Vaseline substance. I rub that on the outside. It looks like a big plastic red teacher's apple. I rub that on my apple. That pheromone lures that fly. She comes flying in, hits that plastic apple, and she's stuck. So I'm going to smile as I warn you. If you don't like the sight of dead bugs stuck to your trap, then maybe that's not the way to go, because you're going to go out, you know, once a month here in May and June and go, oh my goodness, I caught like 400 of them. And you go take a paper towel and you smear them off and throw them in the garbage, and then you put some more glue on there and you catch some more of them. So the maggot traps to me are a no-brainer. They're easy to get, easy to use. You can save them for years. They don't look too bad. And I think they're extremely effective if you get them out there early. And again, not hang them and walk away in August, go, what happened? You have to go out every couple weeks and say, oh yeah, I'm catching them, sweet. Let me clean this off and put some more glue on there. It's not an expensive thing to do, just a little bit of time.
We have some questions about maximizing fruit production, whether it's how you pick the fruit off the tree. Do you take it all? Do you only take part of it? Do you need to thin? How do you kind of get the max production?
You know, probably a little bit of that's more what you want to do with your tree. I will tell you, especially the spur type fruits, you know, if we kind of take apples and pears and Asian pears and all that together, I will always get a cluster of fruit. And absolutely, if I pinch 1 or 2 out of there, I will probably get a little bit larger apple on that same cluster versus it splitting its energy into all the different fruits. So thinning it out, absolutely. It's not going to change the taste or the quality or anything else. I'll probably just get a little bit bigger if I thin a little bit. If I'm going to maximize on an older tree, you know, yes, maybe a little bit of thinning. If I have a new tree that I'm taking home this year, I'm going to try to talk you into picking most of the fruit out, because I want that little creature to put his energy into wood and long-term and root system to get established. Maybe the Asian pears is the one thing here that you'll probably get a lot on that first season. You know, leave one here, a couple here, one there, one here, enjoy some fruit the first year, pick the rest of it off and let it put the energy into the tree for that season.
We've had a lot of questions about pruning. Trevor kind of covered that throughout the course of the class. So just a friendly reminder, we do record these so that you can go back through, kind of pause and get information, you know, how best it suits you, see how he pruned them, kind of pause, you know, pause the video and do it in real time on your own. We post it on our website later today on our classes page, and we'll also post it up on YouTube, so you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. That way you get notification when it goes up. So instead of answering all these specific questions about how to prune columnars and all these things, I'd advise you to just go back and watch the video, because he does address all of those things.
Yeah, or again, send a picture of it if you want. I could try to do it on the email. Certainly, probably espalier is the one thing that's a little harder to explain. I mentioned at the beginning, we have two here right at the nursery that we utilize. If you come down here sometime, just find me and I'll go give you a quick little pruning espalier lesson, hands-on. You can kind of see how we keep ours nice and tidy.
There's been a lot of questions about grafting. Do you have a resource to direct people on tips or how to go about grafting things if that's the way they choose to go?
Most of the, you know, every county has got an extension, you know, Snohomish County, King County, all of us around here. In fact, every state really does the same thing. Contact your county extension office, because most of us have a fruit tree society of some kind. I mentioned Seattle Fruit Tree Society. I don't know that they've got a lot of information on grafting on their website. Definitely Washington State University and Oregon State in the Northwest are the two leaders for information on subjects like that. You can find probably a lot of information on their websites, as they also sponsor Master Gardener programs and the large fruit tree research facility right up in Mount Vernon, just about 20 miles north of us here. That would be a great resource, because that's what they're doing up there.
We've also had a lot of questions about which varieties are best to choose for cross-pollination. The best idea we can probably recommend is come down and talk to us. We're happy to recommend things. We also have a pollination chart up on our website on the fruit tree page as well that'll help you kind of see what varieties are good for each other. But, you know, talking to a professional is probably the best way to go to make sure you get a variety that you like and that's a good cross for what you're looking for.
Yeah, well, and typically we would ask you down here, are you looking for fresh eating? Do you want keepers? Do you want to use it for cooking? You know, there's a lot of aspects you can use the fruit trees for. So a little bit of that conversation would help you get exactly what you need.
Going back to mason bees a little bit, Trevor, do you need to get new mason bees every year? What do you do with their houses? Do you clean them out every year?
Yep. If I go through my, you know, kind of annual mason bee program, yeah, if you're buying them new, you're starting from scratch. We get a little hive. You can probably, again, we've got really nice little wood ones here. It's a very small hole with tubes that go in. I always want to sterilize. Everybody's probably familiar with the news, and you got virus this and you've got disease that. A lot of the bee colonies are crashing. I just want to make sure, you know, my little bees are happy. So I'll just pick that time. Usually it's later spring to early summer, you know, sometime in June, probably for me. I just want to take that house that I have out there. I use like a 10% bleach solution, mix it in water, get a little pipe cleaner, and I would just literally clean those holes out and essentially sterilize that hive. It's ready to go. These are not bees that are out 12 months of the year. You're going to see them typically picking up mud, grass blades, this and that, and repacking their larvae into your house that you already have. And that's what happens here over the summer. And they're all ready to go by the time we hit fall. And then you'll see them hatch out again that next year.
We talked about grass getting too close to the base of your trees. Do you have ideas on how to basically keep the grass away so it doesn't creep in?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's a maintenance thing, and I fight it, not necessarily fruit because we keep them separate, but all over the place. And nobody wants to go weed the same thing, 6 times a year to keep it clear. So if you can clean it once and start it, there's all kinds of really useful edging. I mean, you can get wood, bender board. I tend to get that Trex type decking, comes in a much thinner grade that's very flexible. You can make beautiful circles with that, or if you like triangles or whatever you want to do. That's something you could use for edging to say, yes, grass, you stay here. I've got clean soil in between that I can mulch. Then I can just go along with my string trimmer, in 2 seconds and make sure the grass isn't hanging over the edge and keep it looking a little bit tidier for me, the OCD gardener. So try a little edging, works great. If you have grass and you want to spray, just be real careful what herbicide you use. We do not want to get it on the trunks. We don't want to get it on the tree at all. There's a lot of good natural grass/weed killers. We carry a botanical cleanup here that would work very well. As long as I don't spray it physically on the bark or the foliage of a plant, I can use that at the ground level. It doesn't hurt the soil. It has no chemical in it. It's all natural. That is something that would kill the grasses and the weeds. Once we warm up a little bit, you're not going to have much action on herbicide here till we probably get up into that 50, 60 degree range pretty regularly. I'd say if you're going to spray, hold off till late March, early April, find a dry day, and then we probably have pretty good death using something natural.
And we talked about watering, but do you have opinions on like the watering, like the gator bags, things that kind of keep water?
Yeah, I don't have a problem with gator bag at all. Again, I think people probably water too much with those on occasion. An established tree doesn't need a huge amount, and if you did that like once a month, just like we were watering, you'd probably be fine. Gator bags are a way that I just get a slow drip that saturates the soil underneath. That could be a soaker hose. It could be a lot of different ways. For me, again, I'm always out, OCD and picking weeds or doing something in my yard when I'm home. So typically old trees, whether it's that, a Japanese maple, anything in the summer, I do the hose trickle thing quite a bit. If I'm out like, okay, I know you need a little bit extra water here in the summer. I'm going to be over here weeding for an hour. I'm going to let you just get soaked down so I don't have to do it again for weeks, after that.
We'll do like maybe 2 or 3 more questions here. We did have somebody local who said that the Seattle Tree Fruit Society is working on a Zoom class on grafting for those of you that are interested in that, hopefully around mid-March. So that's a good resource for you to look into. Thanks, Mike, for that tip. Do you have, how far away should you plant things from a septic drain field?
Yeah, that's a great question. Septic, I would never want to pay the bill of a septic system that got damaged by roots. So I would say at least 25 feet, depending on the tree again. Cherries and plums and peaches and apricots and that tend to have a little bit more spreading root system. So I might even go farther just to be safe. But I'd say 25 feet. You don't want to ever take a chance of that tree getting in there where you've got to pay somebody to come redo that whole drain field kind of thing. So try to go 25 feet if you can at least.
Water sprouts, specifically on an apple tree, is now the time to cut those? Should you wait?
Yep. Well, and again, part of that is kind of the pruning discussion. If I've got water sprouts, if you heavy cut any kind of tree, but especially apple, pears, 40 of them head for the sky and grow 6 feet that summer. That's kind of what I was trying to get you to think about earlier, is not, walking out and cutting all of them off, because it's never going to end. You're not going to stop it from doing that. It's the nature of the tree. If you can cut most of them off, not leaving any stubs, right down to that hard old wood, and maybe leave one here and one here and one here, and going in directions you want them to. Don't leave it 8 feet long, cut it down. I'll grab my branch here. Let's just pretend this was heading out, going straight up for the sun. I'm going to leave another space, and I'm going to take this and maybe I cut it down to there. and leave myself 1 or 2, 3 or 4 buds, because this is where I'll push out all those spurs this season that I get to pick next year. If you walk out every year, Nicole mentioned a bunch of people were asking, you know, my tree quit, you know, no production here for last year. My first question would be, when did you prune it and what did you do when you pruned it? Because most people go in and saw off all those water sprouts. I got no 1-year wood left on that tree to make 2-year-old spurs, and then I skip a year, if that makes sense. So you got to be real careful how much you take. That's why I like, you know, 90% of them are going away, nice clean cuts down to the old wood, but I'm going to leave those shortened ones here and there across the top of the tree to develop that next level and give me that production the next season again.
We've covered a lot of ground today, and I know that there's still a lot more we could talk about. We love talking plants. It's our lives for a lot of us. So we're happy to start conversations with you, whether it's here in the nursery, over the phone, on email, whatever that is. Please feel free to reach out to us and start, you know, conversations about specific issues. You want to talk some more of these things more in depth that Trevor covered today, whatever it is, reach out to us. We're happy to help. Thanks for hanging with us over the class time. We appreciate it. There's still lots of questions we missed. Sorry, we didn't have time for everybody, but again, we'd love to talk with you in person. So reach out. Our phone number's on our website, sunnysidenursery.net. And then you can send us an email, sunnysidenursery@msn.com. We're going to post this later today, so it'll be available. We've got that discount that Trevor talked about available until next Friday. So we hope to see you around the nursery, and good luck in your fruit tree growing.
Yeah. Stay safe, everybody. Thanks for joining us.